I do not. Here's the reason why. Let me go back to that tune. There we go. Um, here's there's a person could look at things in key center, which is a fine and good way, and sometimes it's really helpful. I mean, if we were playing this at 255 beats per minute, being able to, if we could look at two measures as being in one key and just burn through that, you know what I mean? Because I mean, the whole thing would be gone so fast. That could be helpful. I find that if we play in key center rather than chord specific, the notes become more indifferent to the chord. You know, uh, every chord has its own chord tones, and and liberties that can be taken in terms of its scale tones. So first of all, the first thing, if you played over, like for example, imagine we had in the key of C a 2-5-1. We had D minor, and we had G7 and C major 7. Cool. 2, 5, 1. Well, this is all in the key of C, obviously, right? So, okay, you know, somebody's playing the chords, and then I take a solo, and I just play, like, in my C major. Now, I wouldn't want to play it like that no matter what, but, you know, if I play it like... And I'm just noodling, I'm basically just kind of noodling around in... You know? I mean, what I'm not thinking about is I'm not thinking about my D minor. And I'm not, all I'm thinking about is like I'm noodling in my C major scale. If I'm thinking D minor, I'm thinking, oh, D to my G7 to my C. And I'm thinking of the chord specifically. And what happens is if you play key center, a lot of the time your chord tones of each chord will be neglected. And also, I'd be overlooking scale tone possibilities. For example, we know that in in C major, the D would be a 2 chord, meaning you'd want a sixth to be Dorian. But what I do is I like to look at chords individually as what they are. I mean, just a D minor is a D minor, and think, well, how could we look at that? I could look at it as a 2 chord in the key of C. I could look at it as like as a 3 chord or as a 6 chord, because in the harmonized scale, the 2, 3, and 6 are all minor, which means I could do any of my minor modes over that D minor chord, meaning I could do Aeolian, for example, with a flat 6. Now, if we're playing really like old-timey inside music for an audience that's not into too much tension, that might restrict me a little. Or cause me to upset people, which I'm perfectly interested in doing, upsetting people. That's why I more think of myself more of an artist more than a musician. But so what I think is like, okay, I got my D minor. That sounds nice. I think that sounds pretty. Why can't I do that in a 2-5? Well, because it's not Dorian. That's Aeolian. You know what I mean? But then we got our G7. And I think to myself, well, I'm not just noodling in C major. This is a G7. It's a 5 of C major, which means I could play altered. So instead of playing Mixolydian, I could be playing altered scale. And then what I do is like, well, how about I do Aeolian for my D minor? And then I do altered for my G7, and then major 7 rolls around, and then maybe I do Lydian. Well, if I'm using key center, then when the D minor chord happens, I'd be playing C major, and when the G7 happens, I'd be playing C major, and when the C major happens, I'd be playing C major. Now, if I'm looking at the chords individually, I see my D minor and I go, oh, well, I could play Dorian, Aeolian, or Phrygian. I mean, I could, in a way, play Locrian, but I mean, we just talk about how far out we want to get here. I'll just do Dorian or Aeolian, let's say. I'll do Aeolian, okay. Here's my G7. I could do G Mixolydian, or I could do G Lydian dominant, which is like Lydian but with a flat 7, so it adheres to all the chord tones, but gets that special raised 4 in there. Or I could do altered, because in this case, it's a 5-1. I could also do dominant diminished. However, that's usually best if it goes from 7, the 5 chord, 5/7, obviously a 5 chord to a 1 minor rather than major for a different reason, but still either of them will work. So I got all these options. I can pick one of these. And then C major comes and I go, well, I could do C major or I could do C Lydian. And so then what happens is I've got, instead of doing this, here's my D minor chord, and here's my G7, and here's my C major chord. You know, instead of doing that, I got, here's my D minor to my G7, and then here's my C major. You know, where it's like I did my Lydian, so D minor, and I did a major 7 in that minor chord because that's be a melodic minor. You know. Me too, yeah, because it's the one that goes, ooh, you know, it's like, yeah. And then we got G7, and there's a lot of those tones that way too, where instead of playing, I mean, think about it. You know what you could also do? If you're not looking at key center, you look at your G7 and go, I could do the blues, man. I could play like to C. So I could play D minor to G7. You know, I could make my D minor kind of bluesy to my G7 to my C major. Maybe I'll do this really outside, bend a Lydian, which would be, you know. And if I'm playing like a jazz guy, I could just play like. But if I'm doing a blues guy, I can do the same notes. That's not bluesy. Yeah. Anyway, I better run because I got another student in 1 minute. But anyway, to answer your question, no, I don't prefer a key center. I can see where situationally be good. There is no bad method. Some might be more efficient for achieving a certain kind of sound, and some might be more efficient for surviving a certain moment, you know, depending on how fast or how many chords or whatever. But no, I much prefer being the sort of slow and deliberate approach, even if it's not slow, because you can get faster with it over time.